All right, let's assemble your pincushions. If you are at the point where you've done all of your embroidery with your line stitches from our first class, you are ready to assemble. What you're going to need is, of course, the embroidery piece. You're going to need some scissors, a pencil or your disappearing ink pen. You're going to need the pins from your kit. There should be 3 or 4 in there. Needle and thread. Now, I know when we do embroidery, I told you to only go uh, fingertips to shoulder, go a little longer today. We definitely, we're just doing a quick running stitch, but it would be annoying to run out of thread here. So I've got more than enough to go around my whole border here. But yeah, don't worry about using a little extra thread for this one. The other thing is I'm using all 6 strands of an embroidery floss for this, just so you can see it. You do not need to do that. If you have any kind of sewing thread at home, you can use that, or you can split an embroidery floss into 5 and 1 so that you don't waste some of your nice embroidery floss that you'll want for embroidery. I did tie a knot in the end. Okay. The other things that you're going to need from your kit are this little square of quilting batting. You can see it's kind of thick and fuzzy. And then there's another square of muslin here. And then you're going to need that big, you've got the big bag here with all of this stuffing in it. That's what we're going to need. All right, so let's go ahead and dive in. I'm going to start with this square of muslin fabric, which is going to be the back of the pincushion. But the first thing I need to do is I need to trim this down. So we're going to go a little loosey-goosey with this, just because of the way I had to make the kit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the square of muslin, I'm going to fold it in half. And I'm just going to use that. Now this design, it's very easy to see the middle of my design. So if you need to like make a little mark, if you had a different design where it's harder to eyeball the middle, um, you can do that. But what I'm going to do is also, this is folded in half, and I'm going to just lay this down across the middle and a kind of eyeball. I can see there's about the same amount of space on each side. So I know I've got that pretty well centered. I'm going to open it up and I can see my design through it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take my pen or my erasable pencil, and I'm just going to trace around the edge of this little square of muslin. So now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to cut out, and I'm going to cut through my cheesecloth, which is attached, of course, because I did my embroidery through it. I'm just going to cut out this square. If you have never cut fabric out before, if you're used to just cutting paper, you're kind of like chop, 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 chop when you cut paper. When you cut fabric, it's nice to just do a long swipe with your blades and then move this up to where your cut ended and wedge it into, whatever the inner part of the blades here, and do your next cut. Slide that up. And turn this. Slide that up. So that's a good method for getting a nice smooth cut as opposed to chop, 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 chop. When you're going to get it, it's going to be all ragged. All right, now that I have that all cut out, I've got my quilting batting and the back of my fabric, the fabric for the back. So first thing I'm going to do is this batting goes directly behind the embroidery piece. And that's just going to be an extra layer for your pins to grab into when this is a finished pin cushion. So I'm just going to, again, eyeball that in the center. I'm just going to carefully flip that over so that stays in place. Now, my muslin backing fabric is going to, if you've never done any sewing before, this might be like, what? But this is how it works. We're going to do what's called right sides together. Now, on your muslin, there is no right side or pretty side. It doesn't matter. So just take your muslin. If this had a print on it, you would put the printed side, let's say this was the pretty side, that would go face down on this pretty side. But with this, it doesn't matter. So I'm going to go ahead and lay this down like that. And I'm going to take my pins and I'm going to pin all three layers, the batting, the embroidered piece, and the muslin fabric together. And to pin, I'm going to just take my pin, I'm going to go through all three layers and just do this. Okay. And you know what? I apologize. I'm going to move that closer to the center like that. Doesn't matter. We just want to keep these all in place. Making a little sandwich here. Okay. Now, if you want to, again, draw around the edge, that's always helpful. And I'm going to come in, I want to be sure I'm catching, it actually doesn't matter if you catch this batting, to be honest, but I'm going to just draw, and I can see the edge here of my embroidered border. I'm just going to draw. So I'm drawing about, what is that, 1/2 to 3/4 inch around the inside of that border. That one's a little too close. Here, you can use a ruler for this if you want. If you're an experienced sewer, you can just eyeball this, whatever works. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is we're going to sew this closed. We have to turn it inside out and stuff it. So I always give myself a little visual indicator because I forget, and I'll sew the whole thing closed and be like, oh no, I have to rip out my threads. So I'm just going to start here or here, and I'm going to sew around the edge to sew this closed. And then we're going to be able to turn it right side out through this gap. I left about 1.5 inches. I would leave 1 inch to at least a minimum of 1 inch, no more than 2 inches. Now, again, I'm using a lot more thread than you need. Go ahead and split your threads or use some sewing thread. And we're just going to do the running stitch, which you know how to do. So I'm going to come up, doesn't matter. Exactly where, like I'm going to come up on this edge. But you don't want to start on a corner. Just make sure you start, whenever possible, I like to start in the middle of a straightaway as opposed to a corner. So just put your gap somewhere in the middle of one side. I'm going to turn this around because I sew this way. And I'm going to do that cheat method on my running stitch. And I'm going to pull this. I'm going to flip this over and make sure my knot is nice and taut. Okay, I don't want to pull really tight because then I'm going to make this gather. I don't want that. I want it to be nice and smooth. And I'm going to get to the corner. My disappearing ink is doing what it's supposed to. It's disappearing. And I'm going to just make sure that my stitch aligns with the corner because you really want to get your needle coming out on that corner to get a nice clean corner. Turn that. I'm going to continue on my way. And I can feel with my finger on the back here that I'm catching that batting. Again, if you miss the batting, if you're sewing out a little bit more, it's not the end of the world. My fingers are a little slippery. I just put lotion on. That was bad planning. Okay, so you can see that I am coming clean off that corner. So I'm going to sew all the way around to here, and then we'll go from there. You can see I've sewn, I started here, I've gone all the way around. I'm about to hit the end here. I'm going to go down for my last stitch. Okay. And I can knot off the same way I always do. This stitch is kind of far away. But I'm going to go through my little loop-de-loop here. And because that's so far away, this isn't so tight, so I'm going to do this again. Go through. Now I'm going to pinch this last stitch so that I don't accidentally pull and gather my stitches. That looks good. I'm going to look around here, double check. This looks good. I'm going to pull my pins. Okay. Now, I love to double check things, even though I'm a little loosey-goosey with the way I do things. I love to double check. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this, and before I do anything else, I'm going to carefully flip it right side out. This is a little tricky because we left a small hole here. But it looks nicer the smaller the hole you have. Work this out. Okay, so I've flipped this right side out, and here's the hole. That was a little hard to get out, but it was fine. I just had to be gentle. So this looks good. I'm secure in here. I didn't miss anything. So now that I feel good that I did a good job sewing around, I'm gonna flip it back inside out again. Um, you don't have to go through this process if you feel confident about your sewing. You can skip the flipping it right side out, but I always do this just in case, because once in a while I realized I missed an edge or something. Okay, I am now back to inside out. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to trim up my edges a little bit. Just going to make them a little smaller. Of course, I'm going to be very careful not to cut through any of my stitches, but I don't need all this bulk in here now. Now, on this area where I still have it open, I'm not going to trim too close over there because it's actually helpful to have a little extra when we're going to hand sew it um, closed once we flip it. So I'm going to leave that side the way it is, and I'm going to trim my corners off though, all four corners. Okay, got rid of all that. So this is what we're looking at. Corners trimmed, and 3 of these sides are closer to my stitching. And now, whoo, we're going to flip it back right side out. Okay, I'm back right side out. It was a little easier to turn because there wasn't so much fabric in there to deal with. Next thing I want to do is I want to push out the corners from the inside. If you have a chopstick, that's a good thing to use. You can use the end of your pen. The only thing you want to be really careful about, I'm going to try it with this cuticle stick from the kit. Don't use the pointy end because it's really easy to go through your fabric and make a hole, and that would be a bummer. So I'm just going to go in here and gently poke out with the less sharp end. And that's doing a nice job. So you can see how nice that looks as opposed to this one. So I'm going to do all 4 of those. Gentle, gentle with this. Okay. Here. And when you make anything in this style, if you make a pillow cover or placemats or something, this poking out the corners is a really nice trick for making it look more professional. So they actually make tools for it, or you can use a bone folder if you've ever done bookmaking, but a chopstick I think is a really good tool for that. Okay, so my corners look nice. This one actually could look a little better. Let's work on this. This actually works quite well. Okay, so there's that. Now I'm gonna stuff it. So you're gonna take, I don't know, honestly, I'm not sure. This stuffing can get really small. So depending on how tight this is sewn and how much border you had, you may or may not need all of it. But you can just take a little bit at a time. We're going to push this in. This is small enough that you should be able to just use your hand. You might, again, if you need to really get in there, you can grab something and push it into the corners. So push it to the back. Get those corners nice and stuffed before you go to the middle. And I'm just going to work on that and get that nice and stuffed. Okay, so I've got that stuffed. I have a one or two handfuls left in the bag. I had plenty of stuffing here. And this feels nice and stuffed, but not overstuffed because you don't want to get it so stuffed that you can't close this in a nice way. So I am again going to use my big fat thread so you can see it. This got a little loose in here, my finishing stitch loosened up. So you can, if yours did this, you can pull on that from the inside and try to tighten that up, re-knot it. Let's see here. Here's my knot. Can I pull on that? I'm not going to make you all watch me do that. Okay, I'm all fixed up here. I had really loosened my starting stitch there when I was flipping the pillow inside out. So I'm going to recommend that you all leave a bigger gap, and I'll put that in the email. Anyway, I am now ready to close this. And so you can see here that, and you can probably see it when you get to this point on yours and you look, the fabric is going to naturally fold itself over just from this sewing right sides together and flipping it inside out method. You naturally get this folding over of the fabric on the inside. So I'm going to work with that, and I'm going to get this, make this sort of nice little closure. Looks like little lips. Okay. I'm going to pull that tight. If you're an experienced sewer, you can probably skip pinning, but if you're not, you can take a pin and run it through all those layers. Pin that closed. Okay. Now, I'm going to do a whip stitch. You all know the whipping when you run, when we do that decorative method where we run a different color thread underneath existing stitches. And when we do that, we're always coming from the same side, right? You go under from the right, over on the top, under from the right, over on the top. This is the same because our stitches, we are going to be penetrating the fabric here, but we're going to be coming always from the same side and then over the top. If you're using a little a light thread that's a single strand, this will hardly show. It is going to show with my big fat thread here. But the idea for this stitch is that it's practically invisible. So it doesn't matter which side you come from, but what you're going to do to start is you're going to put your needle, and this has a knot in it, and I ended up with enough thread left from my border stitching. I didn't have to add any new thread, but I did retie the knot. I'm going to come in between these pieces, and I'm going to just slit my needle very close to the edge here. So we're going to be making teeny tiny stitches. Okay. So there's my knot sticking out, but I started from in between. Instead of just starting over here, I started from in between because now I can hide my knot. I'm going to tuck it inside there. Okay. So my knot is hidden. Now I'm going to do this whip stitch. Okay, and I started from the middle and came out from the left. I'm always going to be coming out on the left now, but I'm going to bring this over the top and I'm going to do right across from where I started, but I'm going to make a big diagonal stitch inside. Okay, so I'm having a teeny tiny stitch that goes across the top, and then I'm hiding where my needle is traveling inside. So I've got this teeny stitch here, but I traveled forward a full stitch length. So now I'm going to come across here, across both layers, penetrate the fabric. What I'm really doing is I'm penetrating this right piece of fabric, and then I'm making this big diagonal stitch inside where they meet. And coming out a full stitch length on the diagonal. Tiny stitch here, but I traveled forward a full stitch length. Gonna do the same thing again. Right across, teeny tiny stitch, hidden, big diagonal stitch. I'm going to do that all the way across again. I'm not going to make you watch me do that. I'm close to the end here, so I pulled my pin out. I don't need that anymore. I'm going to do one more of that whip stitch over here. I'm going to go across the top. Now, I'm going to come out right by where I went in for my last one. I'm going to do that knot tying thing right through the loop. Okay, that knot is right where the stitch was going in. I'm doing a single to keep it hard to see. I'm just sort of dispersing my padding here. And now, so I've already got a knot, and what I'm going to do to hide the tail of my thread is I'm going to go in right next to it, teeny tiny stitch. I'm going to go through all this padding. I'm going to squish this, and my needle is going to come out somewhere over here. I've got my tail stuck in there. All right. So my tail is coming out. Whoops. Sure you don't do that. Okay, so here's the tail of my thread. I'm going to take my embroidery scissors. I'm going to pull this tight, snip that, and it snuck back inside. But I've got like a 3 or 4 inch tail in there. So that's really hidden and it's very unlikely to come out. Okay, look at how cute my pin cushion is. Now you have a place to keep your needles and pins for class. Wonderful. If you have any questions, feel free to send me an email. I would also love to see pictures of your finished pin cushions. So please send me pictures, and I'll compile them and send them out to everybody in the group. All right? Yay!